The morning after Richard Ashford hit his wife hard enough to split her lip, Vivian stood at her bathroom mirror, watching the swelling bloom like a dark flower across her face. 28 years. She had given this man 28 years of her life, her dreams, her dignity. Her reflection looked foreign to her now, a ghost of the woman she had once been. At 56, she could still see traces of the hopeful girl who had said yes to Richard's proposal, believing she had found her prince in a fairy tale. That girl had believed in love, in partnership, in the promise of happily ever after. As Vivian touched the dried blood at the corner of her mouth, something shifted behind her eyes, something cold and clear and final. Tonight, she would cook Richard one final meal. Tomorrow, everything would change. The previous evening played in her mind like a film she had watched 1,000 times before. They had attended a charity gala, one of the endless parade of events where Richard paraded her on his arm like a prized possession. She had spent 3 hours having her silver-threaded natural hair styled into elegant twists. Her gown had cost more than most families spent on rent in a year. And none of it had mattered. During dinner, a conversation had turned to real estate development in the city's historic district. Richard had made a claim about zoning regulations that Vivian knew to be incorrect. In her former life, before Richard had convinced her to give up her interior design career, she had worked on projects in that very neighborhood. Without thinking, she had gently corrected him. Just a small clarification, delivered with a soft smile and diplomatic language. She had even tried to frame it as adding to his point rather than contradicting it. It had not mattered. Richard's eyes had gone flat and cold across the table, the warning sign she had learned to read decades ago. He had smiled at their dinner companions and smoothly changed the subject, but Vivian had felt the temperature drop between them. She had spent the rest of the evening with her stomach in knots, counting the minutes until they could leave. In the car, he had been silent. In the elevator to their penthouse, he had been silent. Walking through the door into their sprawling apartment with its museum-quality art and designer furniture, he had been silent. And then, he had not been silent. "You made me look like a fool," he had said, his voice controlled and quiet, which was always worse than when he shouted. In front of the Hendersons, in front of people who matter. "Richard, I did not mean to contradict you. I was just trying to add context about the neighborhood from when I worked there, and—" The slap had come without warning. His hand, the one that wore the platinum wedding band she had placed there 28 years ago, had connected with her mouth hard enough to snap her head to the side. She had tasted blood immediately. "When I worked there," he had mocked, his lip curling. "That was a lifetime ago, Vivian. You have not worked in decades. You have no expertise anymore. You have nothing but what I give you, and I give you everything, do I not? This apartment, those clothes, that jewelry, everything you are, I made." She had stood there, hand pressed to her bleeding lip, and said nothing. "I expect gratitude," he had continued, straightening his cuffs as if nothing had happened. "I expect respect. I expect my wife to make me look good, not contradict me like some know-it-all at a dinner party. Do you understand?" "Yes," she had whispered. "Good. Clean yourself up. You look pathetic." He had walked to his study and closed the door. She had heard the clink of ice in a glass, the sound of him pouring his nightly scotch. Just another Tuesday for Richard Ashford III. Vivian had gone to bed without another word, but she had not slept. Now, standing at the bathroom mirror in the gray light of early morning, Vivian made a decision she should have made years ago, perhaps decades ago, perhaps the first time he had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, back when they were newly married, and she had convinced herself it was passion, not violence. She was done. Not in a way that involved screaming or throwing things or the kind of dramatic confrontation that Richard would easily deflect. She had learned long ago that direct opposition only made things worse. Richard was a master of manipulation, of making her doubt her own memories, her own perceptions, her own worth. No, Vivian would leave the way she had survived, quietly and carefully, with a plan that had been building in the back of her mind for years. She showered carefully, dressed in clothes that covered the mark on her face, and went to make Richard's breakfast. "There is my beautiful wife," Richard said when he appeared in the kitchen, showered and dressed in one of his custom suits. He walked over and kissed her cheek, directly next to the swelling she had carefully concealed with makeup. "You look lovely today." "Thank you," Vivian said, setting his plate in front of him. Eggs precisely the way he liked them. Toast with the corners trimmed, fresh squeezed orange juice. "About last night," Richard began, and for one wild moment, Vivian thought he might actually apologize. But then he continued, "I'm glad we understand each other. I know I can be demanding, but it is only because I know you are capable of being the wife I need you to be, when you apply yourself." "Of course," she murmured. "I have meetings until 7 tonight. Do not wait up." He stood, leaving his dishes for her to clear, as he always did. At the door, he turned back. "And Vivian? Maybe we will go somewhere nice this weekend. A little trip. You would like that, would you not?" This was the pattern. Violence followed by gifts. Cruelty followed by calculated kindness. The push and pull that had kept her off balance for nearly 3 decades. "That sounds lovely," she said. He smiled satisfied and left for the office. Vivian waited exactly 15 minutes after the elevator doors closed behind him. Then she moved. First, the safe in her closet, the one Richard did not know she knew the combination to. Inside was a folder she had been building for 7 years, photographs of injuries, dated and documented, screenshots of threatening text messages, copies of financial records that showed assets hidden from their accountants. A small external hard drive containing recordings made on the voice memo application of a phone Richard did not know she had. She had not known what she was saving them for, not really. Some part of her had imagined using them as leverage someday, or perhaps as proof when no one believed her. But mostly she had gathered them as validation for herself, evidence that what was happening was real, that she was not the crazy, ungrateful woman Richard told her she was. Now she knew exactly what they were for. Her hands trembled as she retrieved the prepaid phone from its hiding place in a box of tampons, one of the few things Richard never touched. The phone had 2 contacts in it. One was Carmen Rodriguez, her oldest and only real friend, who owned a bed and breakfast an hour outside the city. Richard thought Vivian had stopped talking to Carmen years ago, which was exactly what Vivian had wanted him to think. The other contact was a number she had saved 20 years ago and never deleted. Tom Brennan. Detective Thomas Brennan, though he had retired years ago. She remembered the night they had met with crystal clarity, even though she had tried for years to forget it. Richard had been particularly vicious that evening, and in a moment of desperate courage, she had called the police. When they arrived, Richard had transformed into the charming, concerned husband, worried about his wife's fragile mental state. He had mentioned her history of anxiety, implied she had been drinking, suggested perhaps she had fallen and confused herself. His partner had seemed convinced, but Tom Brennan had looked at Vivian with clear blue-gray eyes that saw everything. She remembered how he had found a moment alone with her in the kitchen, how he had quietly handed her his card and said, "If you ever need anything, anything at all, even if you just need someone to believe you." She had hidden that card like a talisman for 2 decades. Sometimes, in her darkest moments, just knowing it existed had been enough to keep her going. She called Carmen first. "It is time," Vivian said when her friend answered. Carmen did not ask questions. They had discussed this possibility many times over secret lunches and whispered phone calls. "The cottage in back is ready. It has been ready for years, Viv. How soon?" "Tonight, after he falls asleep. I will leave the light on." Then Vivian dialed the second number. Her finger hovered over the call button for a long moment. 20 years. She had no idea if this number even still worked, if Tom Brennan would remember her, if he would think she was foolish for reaching out after so long. She pressed call. "Brennan Security Consulting," a deep voice answered after 3 rings. Her voice stuck in her throat. "Hello." A pause. "Is someone there?" "Detective Brennan," she finally managed. "I do not know if you remember me. My name is Vivian Ashford. You came to my home 20 years ago and you gave me your card and said if I ever needed anything." Vivian. His voice changed completely, softening with recognition and something else she could not quite identify. "I remember you. I have never stopped remembering you. Are you safe right now? Where are you?" The tears she had been holding back began to fall. "I'm leaving tonight. I have somewhere to go, but I thought you should know. I do not know why I called. You called because you needed to know someone was in your corner, Tom said firmly. And I am. I have been for 20 years, Vivian. I've been checking on you through mutual contacts, making sure you were still. I know that sounds strange, but I never forgot that night. I never forgot you. She could not speak. Tell me where you're going tonight, he continued. I will come, not to interfere, not to take over, just to make sure you get there safely. And if you need help with what comes next legally, I have contacts. My daughter is an attorney who specializes in situations like yours. Vivian gave him Carmen's address. When she hung up the phone, she sat on the floor of her closet and cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she had not been as alone as she thought. The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. She packed one bag with essential documents, some cash she had squirreled away over years, a few pieces of jewelry that had been her mother's rather than Richard's gifts, and exactly 3 changes of clothes. She wanted nothing else from this gilded prison. Then she began to cook. She made all of Richard's favorites, beef tenderloin with his preferred herb crust, twice-baked potatoes loaded with all the fixings, a Caesar salad from scratch, the way his mother used to make it. For dessert, chocolate lava cake that she had spent years perfecting to his exact specifications. This was not a meal made from love. It was a goodbye made from the ashes of love that had never really existed. Richard had wanted a possession, not a partner. She had been too young and naive to understand the difference. Richard came home at 8, an hour later than he had said, smelling faintly of perfume that was not hers. Once, this would have devastated her. Now she barely noticed. "What is all this?" he asked, surveying the elaborate dinner with surprise and evident satisfaction. "I wanted to thank you," Vivian said quietly. "For everything. For this life." He smiled, the charming smile that had won her over. 3 decades ago, the one he used when he believed he had won. Now this is more like it. This is the wife I married. They ate in what Richard interpreted as companionable silence. He complimented each course, told her about his day, made plans for the weekend trip he had promised. Vivian nodded and smiled and said all the right things, and inside she felt nothing at all. After dinner, he poured himself a scotch and retired to his study. She cleaned the kitchen with meticulous care, washing each dish by hand, putting everything in its proper place. At 11, she heard him climb the stairs and get ready for bed. She waited. At midnight, she went upstairs and slipped into bed beside him. He was already snoring, secure in his power, certain in his control. She lay in the dark with her eyes open, listening to the rhythm of his breathing and counting down the hours. At 3 in the morning, Vivian slid out of bed. She changed into the clothes she had laid out earlier, dark and practical. She retrieved her bag from its hiding place. She took one last look around the bedroom where she had spent 28 years feeling afraid, lonely, and small. Then she walked out of the apartment, down the service elevator, and into a waiting car that Carmen had sent. The last thing she did before leaving was set a timer on her phone. At 6 in the morning, a text message would be delivered to Judge Patricia Morrison, her mother's oldest friend. Along with the message would be copies of all the evidence Vivian had gathered. Patricia had agreed to help, and she had agreed to do something that would ensure Richard understood that his wife was not coming back. The city lights blurred past the car windows as Vivian left her old life behind. She did not cry. She did not look back. She simply watched the darkness give way to the first hints of dawn and allowed herself, for the first time in 28 years, to imagine a future that was her own. Chapter 2. Richard Ashford woke at his usual time of 6:30, his internal clock as precise as every other aspect of his carefully controlled existence. He stretched luxuriously in the California king bed, reaching automatically for the space where his wife should be. Empty. He frowned slightly but did not think much of it. Vivian often rose early, always eager to make his breakfast and ensure his morning ran smoothly. It was one of her better qualities, her dedication to his comfort. He showered and dressed, choosing a suit that conveyed authority without being ostentatious. He had an important board meeting today, and appearances mattered. Everything mattered when you were Richard Ashford III. As he descended the stairs, a smile crossed his face. He could smell breakfast. Not just any breakfast, but what seemed like an entire spread. Pancakes, bacon, something sweet. His smile widened. The elaborate dinner last night, and now this. Vivian had clearly internalized his lesson about proper behavior. Sometimes she needed reminders, but she always came around eventually. "Good. You finally understood," he called out as he walked toward the dining room, adjusting his cuffs with satisfaction. "I knew you would come around, Vivian. You always do. This is exactly what I was talking about last night. This is what a good wife looks like, and I knew you had it in you, even if sometimes you need a firm hand to remember your place in this household." He rounded the corner into the dining room, still talking, and stopped. The table was indeed filled with an elaborate breakfast spread, silver platters of pancakes, towers of fresh fruit, gleaming pitchers of juice, artfully arranged pastries. It was the kind of breakfast that would have impressed even his most demanding business associates. But the woman sitting at the head of his table, in his seat, was not his wife. Judge Patricia Morrison looked up from the document spread before her, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her expression one of cool professionalism with an undercurrent of barely contained fury. She was a striking black woman in her late 60s, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, her silver hair cropped close to her head. She carried the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding courtrooms and did not suffer fools. "Mr. Ashford," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Please have a seat. We have much to discuss." Richard's expression underwent a rapid transformation, confusion, then recognition, then a forced smile that did not reach his eyes. "Patricia, what an unexpected surprise. I was not aware we had a meeting scheduled. If you wanted to discuss that donation to the courthouse renovation project, my assistant could have arranged something more formal." "This is not about donations, Richard. Sit down." Something in her tone made him comply, though he chose a chair at the opposite end of the table, reasserting some measure of control over his own space. "Where is my wife?" "Vivian is safe. That is all you need to know, and frankly, more than you deserve to know." Patricia removed her glasses and fixed him with a stare that had made hardened criminals confess. "I am here as a personal favor to an old friend. Vivian's mother and I were sorority sisters. I watched that girl grow up, and I have watched you systematically destroy her for the past 28 years. I do not know what Vivian has told you," Richard began, his voice smooth and practiced, "but my wife has a history of emotional instability. She has a tendency to exaggerate, to misremember, to create drama where none exists. If she has made accusations against me, I can assure you that there are explanations for any misunderstandings." Patricia held up a hand. "Save it. I have heard every excuse men like you offer. The wife is crazy. The wife is lying. The wife is emotional. But here is the thing, Richard." She slid a thick folder across the table toward him. "Vivian is none of those things. What she is meticulous." Richard's composure cracked slightly as he opened the folder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, bruises in various stages of healing, a split lip, a black eye, a welt in the shape of a hand across a shoulder blade. Each photo was dated and annotated. "That proves nothing," he said, but his voice had lost some of its smoothness. "She could have done those to herself, or gotten them somewhere else. There's no proof that I caused any of that." "Keep reading." He turned the pages with hands that had begun to tremble slightly, transcripts of text messages where he had threatened her, screenshots of emails where he detailed exactly what he would do if she ever tried to leave. And then the recordings, dated files with titles like "After Henderson Dinner Party" and "Anniversary Night," and "When I Asked About the Credit Card Statement." "Vivian has spent years building this case," Patricia said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "She has documentation going back 7 years, text messages going back further than that, and multiple audio recordings of you admitting to physical abuse, making threats, and engaging in what any prosecutor would consider criminal behavior." Richard's face had gone pale. "Those recordings were made without my consent. They would never be admissible in court." "Perhaps not all of them, though you might want to check on one-party consent laws in the states where some of these conversations took place. But admissibility is not really the point, is it?" Patricia leaned forward. "The point is what happens when these materials find their way to the board of Ashford Industries, to your country club, to the donors of all those charities where you serve on boards, to the newspapers that have always been so eager to report on the philanthropic Richard Ashford. "This is blackmail," Richard spat. "No, this is information. What you choose to do with it is up to you. Now, as for the immediate matters at hand." Patricia pulled out a second set of documents. "Divorce papers. Vivian is requesting an equitable division of marital assets, which, given your behavior, is extraordinarily generous of her. She could push for far more given the circumstances." "I will never sign those." "That is your prerogative. But you should know that a protective order has already been issued, effective immediately. You are prohibited from contacting Vivian directly or through any third party. You are prohibited from going within 500 feet of her current location, which, for your information, you do not know and will not be told." Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You cannot do this. Do you have any idea who I am? I have connections. I have lawyers. I will have your judgeship." Patricia remained seated, utterly unmoved. "Richard, I have been a judge for 32 years. I have faced down mob bosses, cartel leaders, and corrupt politicians. You are a man who beats his wife because it makes him feel powerful. You do not frighten me, and your connections will be significantly less useful once news of these materials becomes public." She stood and gathered her things with the calm efficiency of someone who had delivered devastating news many times before. "One more thing. During the review of your financial records, some irregularities were discovered. Hidden accounts, unreported offshore holdings, some questionable transactions that caught the attention of people who pay attention to such things. I understand there may be an investigation forthcoming from the Securities and Exchange Commission." Richard's face had gone from pale to ashen. "What have you done?" "I have done nothing except deliver some papers. Whatever else unfolds is the result of your own actions over many years." Patricia walked to the door, then turned back. "Vivian asked me to tell you something," she said. "Thank you for the 28 years. They taught me exactly who I do not want to be, and exactly the kind of love I do deserve. Have a good day, Mr. Ashford." She left him standing in his dining room, surrounded by a breakfast he would never eat, holding divorce papers in hands that would not stop shaking, watching his carefully constructed world begin to crumble around him. Before we continue with Vivian's story, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had someone see the truth of your situation when everyone else was fooled? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you are enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you never miss a video. The bed and breakfast sat at the end of a winding country road, surrounded by oak trees so old their branches seemed to hold up the sky. Vivian had not seen Carmen's place in years, not since Richard had made the visits too difficult, too dangerous. But as the car pulled up the gravel drive in the pale light of early morning, something in her chest loosened for the first time in decades. Carmen was waiting on the porch, a cup of coffee in each hand. She was a warm, solid presence, with laugh lines earned from decades of joy and thick silver-streaked hair she refused to dye. When Vivian stepped out of the car on trembling legs, Carmen simply opened her arms. "You made it," Carmen said softly, holding her friend tight. "You actually did it. After all these years, you actually did it." Vivian could not speak. She just held on, shaking, as the magnitude of what she had done began to settle over her. "Come inside," Carmen said. "I have the cottage ready for you. Private entrance, beautiful view of the garden, and absolutely no way for anyone to find you here without going through me first." The cottage was small and perfect, decorated in soft colors that felt like a warm embrace. Vivian set her single bag down and sank onto the bed, staring at her surroundings as if she had landed on another planet. "I do not know what I am supposed to do now," she admitted. "I have been planning this for so long, but I never really believed I would actually go through with it. And now that I have, I feel like I am standing at the edge of a cliff, and I do not know if I am about to fly or fall." Carmen sat beside her and took her hands. "Right now, you do not have to do anything except breathe, eat, sleep. Let yourself feel safe for the first time in decades. Everything else can wait." "There is someone coming," Vivian said hesitantly. "Someone I called. An old... I do not even know what to call him. We have not spoken in 20 years, but he He was the first person I thought of when I decided to leave. Is that strange? Carmen studied her friend's face with knowing eyes. A man who made you feel safe when you felt most afraid? Someone you held on to the memory of through all those dark years? No, mi amor. That is not strange at all. Tom Brennan arrived 3 hours later, driving a practical sedan that had seen better days. Vivian watched from the cottage window as he got out of the car, and something in her chest constricted. He had aged, of course. 20 years would do that. His hair had gone fully silver now, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. But he still carried himself with that same steady presence, that same quiet strength that had made her feel, for just a moment 2 decades ago, like everything might somehow be okay. She met him on the cottage porch. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "Vivian," he said, and her name and his voice sounded different than she had ever heard it before. Reverent, relieved. "You came," she whispered. "I would have come 20 years ago if you had called. I would have come any time in between. I would have moved mountains to get here if you needed me." His blue-gray eyes swept over her face, cataloging every mark, every shadow of pain. When his gaze found the fading bruise at the corner of her mouth, his jaw tightened visibly. "That bastard! It does not matter anymore. I am out. I am free." "May I?" He lifted one hand, hovering near her face without touching, asking permission for something as simple as contact. The gesture, so different from every touch she had known for nearly 3 decades, brought tears to her eyes. She nodded. His fingers barely grazed her cheek, as gentle as if she were made of spun glass. Up close, she could see that his own eyes were bright with unshed emotion. "I spent 20 years wondering if I should have done more that night, if I should have pushed harder, found a way to help you even when you said everything was fine. I have carried you with me every single day, Vivian. Every single day." "You gave me your card," she said softly. "You told me you believed me. Do you have any idea how many times I held onto that card like it was the only real thing in the world? When Richard would make me question my own sanity, my own memories, I would look at that card and remember that someone saw the truth." "I saw you," Tom said simply. "I have always seen you." They stood there on the porch as the morning light grew stronger, not quite touching, not quite separate, occupying a space that felt like the beginning of something neither of them had dared to imagine. Carmen appeared with coffee and pastries, breaking the charged moment with practical efficiency. "You both need to eat. Tom, there is a room in the main house if you are staying. I assume you are staying." "If that is all right with Vivian." "Please stay," she said, and meant it more than she could express. That first day blurred together in fragments. Vivian slept for the first time without fear, waking disoriented and uncertain until she remembered where she was. She ate food that Carmen pressed on her, barely tasting it. She spoke with Tom about practical matters, about his daughter the attorney, about the legal process that lay ahead. And then night fell, and the real conversation began. Vivian could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the penthouse, listening for footsteps, waiting for the door to open, bracing for impact. At 2 a.m, she gave up and wandered to the cottage's small kitchen to make tea. She found Tom sitting in the living room, a book open but unread in his lap, his eyes on the darkness beyond the window. "I could not sleep either," he admitted. "I keep thinking about all the years in between, all the nights when you were in that house with him, and I was somewhere else, not knowing if you were safe, not able to do anything about it." "It was not your responsibility to save me," Vivian said, settling into the chair across from him. "I had to be ready to save myself. I know that. Rationally, I know that. But when I look at you now, at what he did to you, I want to go back in time and tear that man apart with my bare hands." The raw honesty in his voice undid something in her. "Tom, will you tell me about the last 20 years? What happened to you? I used to imagine, sometimes, what your life was like, what kind of man you became." He set the book aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I got married. A good woman, Catherine. She was a nurse. We had 30 years together, raised a daughter, built a life that made sense." His voice softened. "She died 8 years ago. Cancer. It happened fast, which I used to think was a mercy. Now I think I would have given anything for more time, even painful time. I'm so sorry. After she was gone, I threw myself into work, took every case I could, worked every hour I could stay awake. I told myself I was serving justice, but really I was just running from grief. He met her eyes. And the whole time, somewhere in the back of my mind, there was you, the woman I could not save, the case that never closed. I told myself it was professional concern. I was lying. Vivian's hands tightened around her mug of tea. Lying about what? About how I felt about you. From the moment I walked into your home 20 years ago and saw the fear in your eyes, the way you held yourself like you were expecting to be hurt, I knew something was wrong. And when I looked at you, really looked at you, I saw the most beautiful, strongest, most broken person I had ever encountered. I fell in love with you that night, Vivian, in the space of an hour. It was completely inappropriate and wildly impractical and absolutely true. You were married. So were you. And Catherine deserved better than a husband with half a heart. I tried to give her everything I could. I hope I succeeded most of the time. But there was always this corner of my soul that belonged to a woman I had no right to think about. The silence stretched between them, full of decades of might-have-beens. I thought about you too, Vivian finally admitted. In my worst moments, when I needed to believe there was goodness somewhere in the world, I would remember your face. The way you looked at me like I was a person, not a possession. The way you believed me without question. You were my proof that not all men were like Richard. Tom moved from his chair to the sofa, leaving space between them but closing the distance. Can I ask you something? She nodded. When did it start? The abuse. Was it always there or did it creep in? And then, in the soft darkness of a night that felt suspended outside of time, Vivian told him everything. She told him about the early years when Richard's control had seemed like devotion and his jealousy had felt like passion. She told him about the first time he grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises and how he had cried and apologized and made her believe it would never happen again. She told him about the escalation, the isolation, the way Richard had systematically cut her off from everyone who might have helped her see the truth. She told him about her children, conceived in rare moments of something that might have been tenderness but was probably just possession, and how Richard had used them as weapons against her. She told him about the gaslighting, the financial control, the constant criticism that wore her down until she could barely remember the woman she used to be. Through it all, Tom listened. He did not interrupt, did not try to fix or explain or minimize. He simply witnessed her pain, holding space for truths she had never spoken aloud. When she finally fell silent, drained and trembling, he reached across the space between them and took her hand. You survived, he said simply. Against everything, against all of it, you survived. And now you are free. I do not know how to be free, she whispered. I have been his for so long. I do not know who I am without that cage. Then we will figure it out together. If you want. No pressure, no expectations, no timeline. Just together. However that looks. The dawn was beginning to lighten the sky outside the windows. Vivian looked at their intertwined hands, at his patient face, at the promise of a future she had never dared to imagine. Stay, she said. Not just tonight. Stay through whatever comes next. I do not think I can do this alone. You will never be alone again, Tom promised. And then, gently, reverently, he pressed his lips to her forehead in a kiss that held 20 years of waiting and a lifetime of possibility. At that precise moment, his phone rang, shattering the fragile peace. Tom glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. It is my old partner, he said, Marcus Webb. He's still on the force. He answered, listening intently, his face growing more grim with each passing second. When he ended the call, he turned to Vivian with carefully controlled calm. Richard has filed a missing persons report. He's claiming you were kidnapped, that someone forced their way into the apartment and took you against your will. Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. He's trying to make me look like a victim of someone else, or a crazy woman who cannot make her own decisions. Yes, it is a classic move. But we have documentation, we have the protective order, and we have the truth. Tom's hand tightened on hers. This is not over, Vivian, but you are not alone in this fight. Not anymore. Chapter 3. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, strategy sessions, and the slow, painful process of dismantling a 28-year marriage. Eleanor Brennan, Tom's daughter, proved to be as formidable as her father had promised. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and an encyclopedic knowledge of domestic violence law, and she approached Vivian's case with the intensity of a general planning a war. "Your evidence is extraordinary," Ellie said during their first full review meeting, spreading files across Carmen's dining room table. "Most victims do not have documentation like this. The photographs alone would be compelling, but combined with the recordings and the financial records, Richard's attorneys are going to have their work cut out for them." "They will try to discredit me," Vivian said. She had learned enough about how these things worked to know what was coming. "They will say I'm after his money. They will paint me as unstable, vindictive, manipulative. They will try. But here's the thing." Ellie leaned forward with a small smile. "Richard's financial situation is not as solid as he has led people to believe. The forensic accountants we brought in have found some very interesting discrepancies. Hidden accounts, unreported income, some transactions that look suspiciously like money laundering. His lawyers are going to be too busy defending him from federal charges to mount much of an offense against you." Vivian stared at her. "Federal charges?" "Securities fraud, at minimum, possibly tax evasion. The SEC has apparently been watching Ashford Industries for a while. Your divorce filing and the financial disclosure it required opened up some doors they had been trying to get through for years." Tom, who had been standing by the window, turned with grim satisfaction. "Karma. 2 decades late, but karma nonetheless." "This does not feel like victory," Vivian said quietly. "It feels like the whole world is exploding." "That is because it is," Ellie said, not unkindly. "Richard built his entire life on a foundation of lies and control. When that foundation cracks, everything built on top of it comes down. It is messy and painful, but the alternative was staying trapped in that lie forever." Over the following days, the explosion Vivian had feared began to unfold in the media. News of Richard's SEC investigation leaked first, followed by rumors of marital discord that quickly became stories of abuse allegations. Reporters began digging, and what they found painted a devastating picture of a man whose public philanthropy masked private cruelty. Former employees came forward with stories of Richard's explosive temper and abusive management. Business associates admitted to witnessing him berate Vivian at corporate events. The housekeeper who had served their home for 15 years gave a tearful interview describing the injuries she had seen, the sounds she had heard through closed doors, the lies she had been instructed to tell. Richard's attorneys released a statement denying everything, calling Vivian a disturbed woman seeking to profit from a failing marriage. The response from the public was swift and merciless. Women shared their own stories in solidarity. Domestic violence advocates praised Vivian's courage. The hashtag #StandWithVivian began trending. Through it all, Tom remained at her side. Not in the spotlight, never trying to speak for her or manage her responses. Simply present. A steady hand to hold when the pressure became overwhelming. A voice of calm reason when fear threatened to swallow her whole. "I do not deserve you," she told him one evening, after a particularly grueling day of depositions. "Do not do that," he said firmly. "Do not diminish yourself. Do not use his words, his beliefs, his version of who you are. You deserve everything good in this world, Vivian. You deserve peace and joy and love without conditions. And if I am lucky enough to be part of that, then I am the one who does not deserve you." She looked at him in the fading light of the cottage living room, at the man who had waited 20 years for a chance to love her openly. The feelings she had been suppressing, the emotions she had told herself she had no right to feel, rose up in a wave she could no longer contain. "Tom," she whispered. He moved closer, closing the distance that they had been so carefully maintaining. His hand cupped her face with that same impossible gentleness, tilting her chin up so their eyes met. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me it is too soon, too complicated, too anything, and I will step back. I will wait as long as you need me to wait." "I do not want you to stop," she breathed. "I do not want to wait anymore. We have been waiting for 20 years. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like anything she had experienced before, not the demanding taking kisses of her marriage, given without thought to her desire or consent. This was a question asked with reverence and answered with longing. This was two people who had circled each other for decades, finally allowing themselves to collide. Tom's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and for the first time in 28 years, Vivian felt what it was like to be held without fear. His hands moved over her back with careful attention, learning the landscape of her body, worshiping rather than claiming. When she trembled, he paused, checking in with his eyes, ready to stop at any sign of discomfort. "I'm okay," she assured him. "Better than okay. I'm just not used to this, to being touched like I matter." "You matter," he said against her lips. "You have always mattered, and I intend to spend however much time you give me proving that to you." They moved to the bedroom together, a slow dance of discovery and healing. Tom undressed her like she was something precious, pressing kisses to each inch of skin revealed. When he found the scars, the old marks of violence that had faded but never fully disappeared, he traced them with tender fingers and whispered apologies he had no need to give. "These are not yours to apologize for," Vivian said. "I know, but I'm sorry anyway. Sorry that anyone ever made you feel like you were anything less than extraordinary." When they came together, it was with a completeness that took her breath away. Not the hurried mechanical encounters of her marriage, but something that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Tom moved with her rather than against her, attuned to every sound, every response, treating her pleasure as sacred as his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the soft lamplight, and Vivian understood for the first time what intimacy without fear felt like. Tom's arms around her were shelter, not a cage. His touch was gift, not demand. His presence was chosen, not endured. "I love you," Tom said into her hair, the words simple and true. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until I stop breathing, and nothing about that love requires you to be anyone other than exactly who you are." Vivian turned in his arms to face him, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "I do not know if I know how to love yet, not properly. Richard broke something in me when it comes to trust and vulnerability, but I want to learn. With you, I want to learn. Then we will learn together," he promised. The peace of that night was shattered 2 days later when Vivian's phone rang with a number she did not recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Mom?" Her son's voice, uncertain and young despite his 32 years, hit her like a physical blow. "Ricky," she breathed, "I need to see you. I know you do not want to talk to me. I know I have been terrible, but I need to see you. Please. How did you get this number?" "Aunt Carmen. I called her and begged. She made me promise I was not working with Dad before she would give it to me." A pause. "I am not, Mom. I promise I'm not." Tom appeared in the doorway, alerted by her tension. She covered the phone and whispered, "My son. He wants to meet." Tom nodded. "I will come with you, and so will Marcus, just in case." They met at a coffee shop an hour outside the city, neutral ground that felt safe enough. Vivian arrived early with Tom, who positioned himself at a table with clear sightlines while Detective Marcus Webb waited outside. When Ricky walked through the door, Vivian felt her throat close. He looked like his father, the same sharp features, the same commanding presence, but his eyes, when they found hers, held none of Richard's coldness. They were filled with something that looked like anguish. "Mom." He sat across from her, hands clasped on the table like he was afraid he might reach for her and she would flinch. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For not seeing. For not stopping him. For being too much of a coward to stand up to Dad when it mattered." "You were a child," Vivian said softly. "It was not your job to protect me. It was my job to protect you. I stopped being a child years ago, and I still did not do anything. I heard the fights. I saw the bruises you tried to hide. I knew, Mom. Deep down, I always knew. And I told myself it was not my business, that you were an adult who could leave if you wanted to, that maybe I was imagining things." His voice cracked. "I was protecting myself, not you. I'm so ashamed." "Your father is very good at making people doubt what they see," Vivian said. "He convinced me I was crazy for years. I do not blame you for being confused. But you should blame me. You should be furious with me. I stood by and did nothing while he destroyed you." Ricky looked down at his hands. "Grace and I talked. She said you would forgive us because that is who you are. But I do not think I can forgive myself." "Then do better," Vivian said firmly. "Do not wallow in guilt. Do something with it. Your father is going to face consequences for his actions. The question is whether you are going to stand with him out of misplaced loyalty or whether you are going to stand for the truth." Ricky met her eyes. "I will testify against Dad. I will tell them everything I saw, everything I heard, everything I should have done something about years ago. His lawyers called me yesterday, threatened me, told me I would be destroying my own father, and I told them I was not destroying him. He destroyed himself. I'm just refusing to be part of the cover-up anymore." Vivian felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You do not have to do that for me." "I'm not doing it for you, Mom. I'm doing it for me. Because I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror. Because I have a girlfriend now, and I realize that if I ever treated her the way Dad treated you, I would deserve to lose everything." He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "And I'm doing it because you deserve justice, even if it is 28 years late." Vivian covered his hand with hers, the first time they had touched in months. "Thank you," she whispered. "Grace wants to see you too. She is scared, but she wants to see you. She is pregnant, Mom, 3 months, and she said she cannot bring a child into this world without dealing with the truth about our family first." A grandchild. New life emerging from the ashes of the old. Vivian felt something shift in her chest, a lightness she had not experienced in decades. "Tell Grace I would love to see her," Vivian said. "Tell her I am so happy for her. Tell her that breaking cycles is the bravest thing any of us can do." The trial, when it finally came, was not the dramatic courtroom showdown of television dramas. It was a grinding, exhausting process of testimonies and cross-examinations, of watching her life dissected by strangers, of having her pain and fear turned into evidence exhibits labeled A through Z. Richard's attorneys tried everything. They claimed the recordings were doctored. They suggested Vivian had inflicted her own injuries for sympathy. They painted her as a gold digger who had trapped a successful man and now wanted to profit from the divorce. But the evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies from the housekeeper, from neighbors, from people who had witnessed Richard's treatment of Vivian over the years. Ricky's devastating account of growing up watching his father terrorize his mother. The financial forensics that showed Richard had been hiding assets and committing fraud for over a decade. When the verdict came down, Vivian was not in the courtroom. She was at Carmen's bed and breakfast in the garden she had spent weeks helping to plant, with Tom's hand in hers and the afternoon sun warm on her face. Ellie called with the news. Guilty on all counts. The judge threw the book at him. And the divorce settlement, everything you asked for, and then some. The judge made it very clear that financial abuse is still abuse, and Richard is lucky he is not facing additional criminal charges for that alone. Vivian listened to the details, to the sentencing recommendations, to the asset division that would leave her more than financially comfortable for the rest of her life. When Ellie finished, there was an expectant silence, as if waiting for celebration or vindication or triumph. "Thank you," Vivian said simply, "for everything." She hung up and looked at Tom. "It is over." "How do you feel?" She considered the question. "Not happy exactly, not triumphant, just lighter. Like I've been carrying something impossibly heavy for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. And now I can." Tom pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Then stand up straight, Vivian Chambers. Stand up and walk into whatever comes next." This story is far from over, loves. If you are as invested in Vivian's journey as I am, please show some love with a like and share this with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to choose yourself. Now, let us see what happens next. Chapter 4. 6 months after the trial ended, Vivian stood in the kitchen of a house she had chosen herself. Not a penthouse purchased to impress others, but a small craftsman home with good bones and a garden that desperately needed someone to love it back to life. The morning light streamed through windows she had picked out, falling across counters she had selected, illuminating a space that was entirely, completely hers. She was making breakfast, real breakfast, the kind cooked with joy rather than fear, seasoned with freedom rather than obligation. The smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the air, along with something else. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Tom came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her shoulder. This was their routine now, this easy intimacy that still made her heart skip despite months of practice. "Good morning, beautiful woman," he murmured. "Good morning yourself." She turned in his arms to face him. "Are you ready for today?" "I have been ready for months. The question is whether you are ready." Today was the grand opening of the Vivian Chambers Foundation for Survivors of Domestic Violence. Using a portion of her divorce settlement, she had established a nonprofit that provided legal services, safe housing, and financial assistance to women trying to escape abusive relationships. Carmen's bed and breakfast had become the model for a network of safe houses they were building across the state. "I am terrified," Vivian admitted. "What if I am not good at this? What if I do not know how to help anyone?" "Then you will learn, just like you learned how to leave, just like you learned how to trust again, just like you learned how to take up space in the world without apologizing for it." Tom cupped her face in his hands. "You have already helped people, Vivian. Every woman who hears your story and realizes she does not have to stay. Every survivor who sees that there is life after abuse. You are changing the world just by living your truth." The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Through the window, Vivian could see Grace standing on the porch, her pregnancy now visible in the curve of her belly, with Ricky beside her. "Your children are here," Tom said with a smile. "I will let them in while you finish breakfast." Rebuilding relationships with her children had been one of the hardest parts of the past months. Grace had been eager to reconnect, hungry for the mother she had never really known without her father's shadow over everything. Ricky had been more cautious, weighted down by guilt that Vivian kept telling him to release. But they were trying. All of them were trying. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, they were becoming a family that was honest rather than performative, connected by choice rather than obligation. "Mom, this place is amazing," Grace said, walking into the kitchen and accepting the cup of coffee Vivian offered. "I love what you have done with it. It feels like you." "It does it not?" Vivian looked around with satisfaction. "I never realized how much of myself I had given up until I started choosing things that I actually liked instead of things Richard would approve of." Ricky set a wrapped package on the counter. "Grace and I wanted to give you something. For the foundation opening, and for everything, I guess." Vivian unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph she had never seen before. It showed her at maybe 26 or 27, before the marriage had stolen her light. She was laughing at something off camera, her eyes bright, her smile genuine. She looked free. "I found it in some old boxes in the attic," Grace explained, "before Dad made you give up your design business, before everything went dark. I wanted you to remember that this woman still exists. She is still in there, and now she gets to come out." Vivian traced the image of her younger self, this stranger, who was also somehow intimately familiar. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is perfect." The foundation opening that afternoon was everything Vivian had hoped for and feared. Survivors came forward to share their stories. Donors pledged support. Media coverage was positive and extensive. Judge Patricia Morrison gave a speech that had half the room in tears. But the moment that mattered most came near the end of the event, when a young woman approached Vivian hesitantly. "Mrs. Chambers," she said softly, "my name is Maria. I saw your story on the news 3 months ago. I'd been married to a man like your husband for 7 years. I thought I was trapped. I thought there was no way out. And then I saw you. I saw that if you could leave after 28 years, maybe I could leave after 7. "Did you?" Vivian asked. "I'm living with my sister now. I have a job at a bookstore. I sleep through the night without nightmares. I'm in therapy. I'm learning who I am when I'm not afraid." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life. I just wanted you to know that." Vivian pulled her into a tight hug, this stranger who was also a sister in survival. "You saved your own life," she said fiercely. I am just glad my story gave you permission to write your own ending." That night, back at the house she had chosen, Vivian stood on the back porch with Tom. The garden stretched out before them, full of the plants they had nurtured together over the past months. Above them, stars pierced the darkness. "I have something I need to ask you," Tom said. Vivian turned to find him holding a small velvet box. "Tom, let me say this before I lose my courage." He opened the box to reveal a simple band with a single stone that caught the porch light. "I have loved you for 20 years. I have waited for you for 20 years. I have watched you transform from a woman trapped in fear to a woman who walks through fire and comes out stronger. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known." He lowered himself to one knee. "I am not asking you to be my wife because I need to possess you or control you or complete some picture of what I think my life should look like. I am asking because I want to be your partner, your equal, your safe place to land at the end of hard days. I am asking because I want to spend whatever time we have left on this earth loving you the way you deserve to be loved, freely and fiercely and without conditions." Tears streamed down Vivian's face. "Vivian Chambers, will you marry me?" She thought about the girl who had said yes to Richard 30 years ago, desperate to be loved, willing to become whatever he needed her to be. She thought about the woman who had spent 28 years shrinking herself to fit inside a cage of someone else's making. She thought about the survivor who had finally found the courage to walk away. And she thought about this man who had seen her at her most broken and had waited 2 decades for the chance to love her at her strongest. "Yes," she said, the word coming out as half laugh, half sob. "Yes, Tom Brennan, I will absolutely marry you." He stood and slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, which felt like a metaphor for everything they had become to each other. Then he kissed her under the stars, and Vivian felt the last piece of fear dissolve into joy. "When?" Tom asked when they finally came up for air. "Soon," Vivian said. "Small. Just family and the people who matter. No performance, no pretense. Just us choosing each other." Perfect. They planned the wedding for 3 months later in Carmen's garden where Vivian had first tasted freedom. It was everything the first wedding had not been. Intimate, honest, joyful. Grace stood as matron of honor, her belly round with new life. Ricky walked his mother down an aisle of wildflowers. Carmen officiated, her voice strong with emotion as she talked about the power of choosing love after surviving hate. Vivian wore a dress the color of sunrise, gold and pink and warm. No white, no traditional anything. Just a dress that made her feel beautiful in a way that came from within rather than from someone else's approval. When Tom took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice wavered with emotion. "I promise to love you without trying to change you, to support you without trying to control you, to celebrate your strength rather than feel threatened by it. I promise to be worthy of the trust you are giving me, knowing how hard-won that trust is." Vivian's own vows came from a place she had not known still existed inside her. "I promise to keep choosing myself, knowing that the healthiest love requires 2 whole people rather than 2 halves. I promise to speak my truth even when it is hard. I promise to stay not because I am afraid to leave, but because leaving was what taught me the difference between obligation and choice. And I choose you, Tom. Every day I choose you." When they kissed as husband and wife, their family and friends erupted in applause. But Vivian barely heard it. She was too busy marveling at the fact that she was 56 years old and felt like her life was just beginning. The reception was held under string lights as the sun set. There was dancing and laughter and the kind of joy that comes from surviving darkness and choosing to celebrate light. When Grace went into labor halfway through the evening, adding unexpected drama to an already perfect day, everyone agreed it was the best wedding gift possible. Vivian and Tom followed the ambulance to the hospital, where they spent the night in the waiting room with Ricky, his girlfriend, and a half-dozen other people who had become family through choice rather than blood. At dawn, Grace's daughter entered the world with a cry that sounded like a promise. When the nurse brought the baby out and placed her in Vivian's arms, she looked down at this tiny new person who would grow up in a world where her grandmother was strong and free. "What is her name?" Vivian asked. "Hope," Grace said from the hospital bed, exhausted and radiant. "Hope Vivian, after the woman who taught me that it is never too late to reclaim yourself." Vivian looked at her granddaughter, at her daughter, at her son standing protectively by his sister's side. She felt Tom's hand on her shoulder, solid and steady. She thought about the foundation that was already helping dozens of women find their way to freedom. She thought about the house she had chosen, the life she had built, the love she had learned to trust. And she thought about the woman who had stood in a bathroom 28 years into a nightmare and had finally found the courage to say enough. That woman had saved her life. This woman, the one holding her granddaughter while her new husband smiled down at them both, was living the life that courage had earned. And it was beautiful. Thank you for joining me on Vivian's journey from captivity to freedom, from fear to love, from surviving to thriving. Her story reminds us that it is never too late to choose yourself, that healing is possible even after decades of pain, and that the love we deserve is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear its message. And if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve love that lifts you up rather than tears you down.